The Solar Queens, Ilara and Nixa, were living legends in the Lysara star system. Ilara, with hair that glowed like strands of sunlight, and Nixa, whose emerald eyes held the depth of 1,000 galaxies, ruled in harmony over one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the universe. Despite their contrasting personalities, Ilara being diplomatic and measured while Nixa exuded raw strength and instinct, they maintained peace and order across the galactic expanse. But the balance they worked so hard to protect was on the verge of shattering. The Council of Eldrith, comprised of alien representatives from Lysara's allied planets, had convened in an emergency session. Nixa entered first, draped in a sleek black gown glittering like starlight, her Andrexian advisors flanking her. Moments later, Ilara followed, her shimmering white attire casting a soft glow across the crystalline chamber. "We don't have time to hesitate," Nixa declared, her voice sharp and commanding. "The Solaris artifact must be activated before it's too late." The Solaris artifact was the stuff of legend, a relic of unimaginable power capable of creating or obliterating entire worlds. For centuries, it had remained hidden, locked away deep within Lysara's core beneath layers of quantum barriers that only the blood of the royal lineage could bypass. "We cannot risk unleashing that kind of power," Ilara replied, her calm tone a stark contrast to Nixa's urgency. "You've seen the ancient records. The Solaris is not just a tool. It's a force of destruction as much as it is creation." Nixa's emerald eyes burned with frustration. "And you've seen what the Zalons have done. They've destroyed 2 neighboring systems already, and their warships are moving closer to Lysara with each passing day. If we don't act now, we'll be next." Ilara's expression hardened as she met Nixa's gaze. "And if we lose control of the Solaris, who will stop us from becoming worse than the Zalons?" Unbeknownst to the Council, hidden in the shadows of the chamber, a spy from the Void Order, a shadowy faction intent on claiming the Solaris for themselves, listened intently. His orders were simple: discover the location of the artifact and ensure the Queens never had the chance to use it. When the meeting adjourned, Ilara and Nixa left the chamber, their steps echoing through the crystalline halls. Though bound by blood and duty, the growing rift between them was undeniable. Nixa believed power was their only means of survival, while Ilara feared it would bring their downfall. "Ilara," Nixa called, her voice softer now as they walked. "You have to trust me." "I do trust you," Ilara said, glancing at her sister. "But trusting you means gambling everything we've built." Nixa stopped abruptly, her tone dropping to a whisper that cut through the still air. "Would you rather gamble or watch Lysara burn?" Ilara didn't answer. Instead, her gaze turned toward the stars beyond the grand windows of the corridor, where nebulae shimmered like jewels on a velvet canvas. Somewhere out there, the fate of their galaxy was unfolding. That evening, as the triple moons of Lysara cast their pale light over the palace, Ilara stood before the forbidden chamber where the Solaris artifact was sealed. The barrier glowed faintly, pulsing in sync with her own heartbeat. She hesitated, her thoughts racing. Nixa would do the same if given the chance, she told herself. But something felt wrong. A shadow moved behind her. Turning quickly, Ilara saw a hooded figure emerge from the darkness, clutching a strange device emitting an eerie hum. Before she could react, the spy activated the device, temporarily disabling the barriers protecting the chamber. The great door began to open. "No!" Ilara exclaimed, extending her hand to summon a beam of solar energy, but it was too late. The Solaris artifact began to glow from within the chamber, its light filling the air with an otherworldly hum. Nixa burst into the corridor just in time to see the artifact awakening, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. "What have you done, Ilara?" "It wasn't me!" Ilara shot back, struggling to contain the artifact's pulsating energy. "Someone else was here. They—" Before she could finish, a powerful surge of light erupted from the Solaris, sending both queens crashing against the walls. When the energy subsided, The artifact floated ominously at the center of the chamber, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Nixa pushed herself to her feet first, her eyes locked on the artifact. "This is a sign, or the beginning of the end," Ilara murmured. The spy had vanished in the chaos, but not before transmitting the artifact's location to his masters. Far from Lysara, forces began to mobilize, readying their fleets to seize the power of the Solaris artifact. As the two queens stared at the relic that now threatened everything, one question loomed in their minds. Could they control a power the galaxy was not ready to face? The cosmic echoes of the Solaris artifact's awakening rippled across the Lysara system. In the wake of the blinding surge, Ilara and Nixa stood in the artifact chamber, the pulsating glow casting long, eerie shadows on the crystalline walls. The atmosphere was thick with energy, both from the artifact and the unspoken tension between the sisters. "Nixa," Ilara said, her voice breaking the silence, "we have to seal it again. The Solaris is too dangerous. And if the Zalons strike tomorrow, what then?" Nixa shot back, brushing a streak of dust from her black gown. "This could be our only chance to defend Lysara. You can't pretend that locking it away will make the threat disappear." Ilara stepped forward, her white gown shimmering faintly in the artifact's light. "Using this power would make us as much a threat as the Zalons. The galaxy doesn't need rulers who wield destruction. It needs leaders who uphold peace." Nixa smirked, a cold edge to her expression. "And how has peace served us, Ilara? Peace doesn't stop warships. Power does." Their argument was cut short as the chamber doors hissed open. Cadrin, a senior advisor to the Queens, and one of the few beings who knew of the Solaris artifact's existence, entered. His blue-skinned Andrexian form shimmered faintly, an indication of his unease. "Your Majesties," Cadrin said, his dual-toned voice echoing. The energy surge. It wasn't contained. "Our long-range sensors are detecting unusual movement near the system's outer perimeter." Ilara turned sharply. "Movement? What kind?" "Zalon scout ships," Cadrin said grimly. "It seems they've detected the artifact's awakening." Nixa clenched her fists, the glow of the artifact reflecting in her emerald eyes. "Then it's already too late to argue." "They know." Ilara's heart sank, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "How long do we have?" Cadrin hesitated. "Hours, maybe less." Meanwhile, light years away, the Void Order's command ship floated in the vast darkness of the Outer Rim. Seated in a chamber of cold steel and dim red light, the Void Admiral, Sarek, reviewed the transmission from his spy on Lysara. The Solaris artifact's location was confirmed. "Prepare the fleet," Sarek growled, his voice deep and commanding. "The Queens will not wield the Solaris. It belongs to the Void." His second-in-command, a pale, reptilian woman named Verak, stepped forward. "And if they resist?" Sarek's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Resistance will only speed their fall." Back in Lysara, the Queens had reconvened in the war chamber. Holograms of their planetary defense fleet hovered above the central table. The scout ships detected by Cadrin were confirmed as Zalon. More troubling, however, was the discovery of a larger fleet gathering just beyond the system's edge. "They'll be here soon," Cadrin said. "Our fleet can hold them off for a time, but the Zalons have numbers on their side." Ilara leaned over the table, her voice calm but firm. "Then we need to fortify Lysara's defenses and evacuate the outer colonies. We can't risk civilian lives." Nixa stood at the opposite side of the table, her arms crossed. "We should be preparing to strike first. We have the Solaris artifact. If we unleash its power—" "We don't even know how to control it," Ilara interrupted, her rare flash of anger stunning the room into silence. "Do you want to gamble with every life in this system?" Nixa stared at her sister for a moment before shaking her head. "It's not gambling. It's survival." As the Queens prepared for war, the Solaris artifact began to stir again. Its pulses quickened, as if sensing the chaos unfolding around it. Deep within the artifact, Ancient mechanisms activated, and faint symbols lit up across its surface. The artifact was waking, not under the Queen's control, but by its own will. Ilara visited the chamber alone that night, her footsteps echoing softly. She approached the artifact cautiously, its pulsating light reflecting in her troubled eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. The artifact seemed to respond, its glow intensifying as symbols shifted and reformed. Ilara felt a sudden, overwhelming presence invade her mind, visions of stars exploding, of galaxies being torn apart. Amid the chaos, she saw a figure, a being bathed in light and shadow, its voice echoing in her thoughts. The power to save, the power to destroy. Choose wisely. Ilara stumbled back, breaking the connection. She knew then that the artifact wasn't just a tool, it was alive, and it was judging them. As dawn approached, the Xeylon fleet entered Lysara's outer perimeter. The battle had begun. Explosions lit up the dark void of space as Lysara's ships clashed with the invading forces. The Queens watched the unfolding conflict from the war room, their tension palpable. "Our defenses are holding. For now," Cadrin reported. "But we can't sustain this forever." Nixa turned to Ilara, her voice low but charged with urgency. "This is it, Ilara. We have to use the Solaris." Ilara hesitated, her thoughts returning to the artifact's warning. "It's not that simple. If we unleash its power, we may win this battle. But at what cost?" Nixa grabbed her sister's arm, her grip firm. "The cost of not using it is Lysara itself. If you won't act, I will." Before Ilara could stop her, Nixa stormed out of the room, her intent clear. She was going to the chamber. As the Queens moved toward their fateful confrontation, the Void Order's fleet arrived on the battlefield's edge. Their sleek, black ships seemed to melt out of the darkness, moving with unnerving precision. Sarek's voice boomed across the comm channels. "This is Void Admiral Sarek. Stand down, or be annihilated." Neither the Xeylons nor Lysara's forces heeded the warning, but Sarek didn't care. His goal was singular, the Solaris artifact, and he would stop at nothing to claim it. Within the artifact chamber, Nixa stood before the Solaris, her heart racing. She reached out, her fingers brushing the glowing surface. The artifact pulsed in response, symbols racing across its surface. "Nixa, stop!" Ilara's voice echoed through the chamber as she ran in. Nixa turned, her expression resolute. "This is the only way, Ilara. If you won't choose, I will." The artifact's glow intensified, and the chamber began to shake. As the Queens faced each other, the weight of their decisions, and the fate of the galaxy, hung in the balance. The artifact chamber trembled as the Solaris surged with power, its glow casting sharp, flickering light across the crystalline walls. Nixa's hand hovered over the artifact, the symbols on its surface dancing in anticipation. "Nixa, listen to me," Ilara called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We don't understand the Solaris. Touching it could destroy us all." Nixa turned slowly, her emerald eyes blazing. "And doing nothing will guarantee our destruction. The Xeylons are already here, Ilara. I won't stand by and watch them destroy everything we've built." Ilara took a cautious step forward, her white gown trailing behind her like a comet's tail. "The Solaris isn't a weapon to be wielded in desperation. It's alive, Nixa. It's judging us." Nixa hesitated, her hand faltering. "What are you talking about?" Ilara met her sister's gaze, her voice softening. "I felt it last night. The artifact showed me things. Galaxies being torn apart. Entire civilizations vanishing. It's more than just power, Nixa. It's sentient. And it's waiting for us to make a choice." Outside the chamber, the battle raged on. Lysara's fleet fought valiantly against the Xeylon invaders, their sleek ships weaving through enemy fire. Explosions lit the starry void as smaller vessels were torn apart in the crossfire. In the war room, Cadrin's voice was grim as he reported to the remaining council members. Our outer defenses are collapsing. The Zalons are pushing toward the inner colonies. If the Queens don't act soon, we won't have a fleet left to protect Lysara. One of the council members, a tall insectoid diplomat named Valex, slammed a chitinous hand on the table. Where are the Queens? They need to use the artifact before it's too late. Kadrin hesitated, glancing toward the chamber on the holographic map. They're deliberating, Valex hissed. We don't have time for deliberation. But before the argument could escalate, a new alarm blared through the war room. Kadrin's eyes widened as he studied the incoming data. Another fleet is entering the system. Void ships. The council fell silent, their collective dread palpable. The Void Order had arrived. In the artifact chamber, Ilara and Nixa were oblivious to the growing danger outside. The Solaris's glow grew brighter, its pulsations faster, as if responding to their conflict. Nixa finally dropped her hand, her frustration evident. If what you're saying is true, then what does it want from us? What kind of choice is it waiting for? Ilara shook her head, her voice filled with uncertainty. I don't know, but I think it's testing us. If we act out of fear or anger, it might... A sudden explosion rocked the palace, cutting her off. The sisters staggered as debris rained down from above. Nixa recovered first, her instincts taking over. That wasn't the Zalons. Ilara's expression darkened. The Void Order. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Void Order's fleet engaged both Lysaran and Zalon ships with ruthless efficiency. Their black, needle-like vessels moved with eerie precision, cutting through defenses like a blade through silk. On the Void flagship, Admiral Sarek watched the chaos unfold with a cold smile. They're too busy fighting each other to stop us. Deploy the infiltration units. The Solaris will be ours before they even realize what's happening. Verak, his second-in-command, nodded and activated a command on the console. The operatives are on their way. Back in the chamber, Ilara and Nixa struggled to regain control of the situation. The artifact's glow dimmed slightly, as if reacting to the destruction outside. We need to stop this, Ilara said, her voice urgent. If the Void gets their hands on the Solaris, they won't, Nixa interrupted. Her voice was firm, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I won't let them. Before Ilara could respond, the doors to the chamber hissed open, and a squad of Void infiltrators stormed in, their black armor gleaming in the artifact's light. Stand down, Queens of Lysara, their leader demanded, his voice cold and mechanical. The artifact belongs to the Void. Nixa stepped forward, her hands igniting with a green, fiery glow. You'll have to kill me first. The leader raised his weapon, but Ilara interjected, Wait, if you fire, you could destabilize the artifact. The infiltrators hesitated, their weapons still trained on the Queens. The leader's voice was laced with suspicion. What are you saying? Ilara gestured toward the Solaris. It's not just a weapon. It's alive. If you force it to awaken fully, it won't distinguish between us and you. It'll destroy us all. At that moment, the Solaris began to pulse again, its light growing erratic. The symbols on its surface shifted rapidly, forming patterns neither Queen nor infiltrator could understand. A deep hum resonated through the chamber, vibrating in their very bones. Nixa clenched her fists, her voice barely audible over the artifact's growing intensity. It's reacting to them. Ilara's eyes widened as she realized the truth. No, it's reacting to us, to our fear, our anger, our mistrust. The Void leader took a cautious step back. What is this thing? A judge, Ilara whispered. And if we fail its test, none of us will leave this chamber alive. As the artifact's energy surged, the Queens and the infiltrators found themselves caught in a deadly stalemate. Outside, the battle continued to spiral out of control, with the Zalons, Lysarans, and Void forces locked in a chaotic three-way conflict. And deep within the artifact, something ancient and powerful began to stir, something that had been dormant for millennia, waiting for this exact moment. The Solaris artifact's glow grew brighter and more erratic, its pulsating hum now deafening. Everyone in the chamber, Ilara, Nixa, and the Void infiltrators, felt its immense power pressing against their minds, like a storm brewing just beneath their skin. "Whatever you're planning, stop it now!" shouted the Void leader, his voice trembling for the first time. He kept his weapon trained on Nixa, but took an involuntary step back. "This thing! It's unstable! You have no idea what you're dealing with," Ilara replied sharply, her gaze locked on the artifact. "If you don't leave now, you'll doom us all." Nixa, however, wasn't backing down. Her green glowing hands flared brighter as she positioned herself protectively in front of the Solaris. "You're not taking it. This power belongs to Lysera. No one can control this power," Ilara snapped, whirling to face her sister. "Not them, not us. It's trying to force a decision. Nixa, don't let your pride blind you." The Void leader glanced between the sisters, his team visibly rattled as the artifact's energy surged again. Cracks began to form in the crystalline walls, and arcs of raw energy lashed out, leaving scorch marks on the floor. Suddenly, one of the Void operatives lost his nerve. "We need to get out of here! This thing is going to blow!" He turned to run, but before he could take another step, a beam of light shot out from the artifact, striking him mid-back. He disintegrated in an instant, leaving only a faint outline of smoke. The chamber fell deathly silent. Above Lysera, the three-way battle had descended into utter chaos. The Void fleet's sudden arrival had thrown the Xelons off balance, but the Lyseran defenses were crumbling under the relentless assault. Explosions rippled across the Void as warships were torn apart, their shattered hulls tumbling into Lysera's atmosphere like falling stars. In the war room, Cadrin watched the carnage unfold on the holographic display. His hands trembled as he delivered his report to the remaining council members. "Our fleet is down to 30% operational capacity. The Xelons have breached the inner colonies, and the Void forces are advancing toward the capital." Valix, the insectoid diplomat, slammed his hand on the table again. "Where are the queens? If they don't use the Solaris, this is over." Cadrin shook his head, his blue skin glistening with stress. "They're in the artifact chamber, but there's no way to contact them. The energy interference is blocking all communications." "Then we're already lost," Valix muttered, his voice filled with despair. In the artifact chamber, the tension reached a breaking point. The Void leader lowered his weapon slightly, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Queens of Lysera, if this artifact is as dangerous as you claim, then no one should have it. Help us destroy it before it destroys us." "No!" Nixa shouted, her voice cutting through the rising hum of the Solaris. "Destroying it would be as reckless as activating it. The Solaris is the key to saving Lysera. It's not just power, it's destiny." "Destiny?" Ilara repeated incredulously. "You sound like the Xelons. They claim every war they start is their destiny. This isn't about fate, Nixa. It's about choice." The artifact seemed to react to Ilara's words, its glow shifting to a calmer, more rhythmic pulse. Ilara noticed and stepped closer, her voice softening. "It's listening, Nixa. It's waiting for us to make the right decision." Nixa hesitated, her fiery resolve faltering as she looked at the artifact. The symbols on its surface were shifting again, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar. She turned to Ilara, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what if the right decision is to use it?" Before Ilara could answer, the Void infiltrators made their move. In the split second of hesitation between the sisters, the leader barked a command. "Now!" Two operatives lunged forward, one aiming a disruptor device at the artifact while the other moved to flank Nixa. Ilara reacted instantly, raising her hands and summoning a shield of golden light to block the disruptor. Nixa, meanwhile, unleashed a blast of green fire, sending the second operative sprawling. "Stop this!" Ilara shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. "You're only making it worse." But the infiltrators were relentless. The Void Leader himself charged forward, a blade of dark energy in his hand, aiming straight for Nixa. She barely dodged in time, the blade grazing her shoulder and leaving a searing wound. Ilara screamed, her protective instincts taking over. A wave of radiant energy erupted from her, throwing the Void operatives across the chamber. For a brief moment, the artifact's glow dimmed, as if responding to her surge of power. As the dust settled, Ilara rushed to Nixa's side. "You're hurt," she said, pressing her hands to the wound, her light weaving into a healing glow. Nixa winced but managed a faint smile. "You always were the healer, Ilara." "And you've always been the fighter," Ilara replied, her voice heavy with emotion. "But this isn't a fight we can win with strength alone." The Void Leader groaned as he pulled himself to his feet, his armor scorched and dented. "You don't understand," he rasped. "The Void doesn't want the artifact for power. We're trying to contain it. It's a weapon, yes, but it's also a curse. If you unleash it, the galaxy will burn." Nixa's expression darkened. "And you expect us to believe you're doing this for noble reasons." The leader met her gaze, his voice filled with bitter honesty. "Noble? No. Practical? Yes. The Void survives by controlling chaos? That's what the artifact is. Chaos incarnate." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. The artifact's hum had grown softer, but its presence was heavier than ever. She turned to Nixa, her voice trembling. "What if he's right? What if this thing isn't just testing us? It's waiting for us to fail." Nixa didn't answer. Her gaze remained fixed on the Solaris, its glow reflecting in her eyes like twin stars. Far above, the Void fleet began its final push toward the capital. Lysara's defenses were on the verge of collapse, and the Zalons were regrouping for another assault. The battle for the galaxy was reaching its breaking point, and in the heart of it all, two queens stood before the Solaris artifact, the fate of their world, and perhaps the entire universe, resting in their hands. The artifact chamber pulsed with tension, its light flickering between serenity and chaos. Ilara and Nixa stood on opposing sides of the Solaris, the weight of countless lives pressing down on them. The Void infiltrators, battered but determined, regrouped, their leader gripping his dark energy blade with resolve. "It's time to end this madness," Ilara said, her voice barely steady. "If we keep fighting, none of us will leave here alive. And if we surrender the artifact, the galaxy will fall to the Void," Nixa countered, her emerald eyes blazing. "You heard him, Ilara. They survive by controlling chaos. They don't want to contain this power. They want to own it." The Void Leader stepped forward, his voice cold. "You think we want this? You think anyone could want the burden of the Solaris? It's not a matter of desire. It's necessity. If left unchecked, this thing will destroy more than just Lysara." "And you expect us to trust you?" Nixa spat, her fiery aura flaring. "You don't have to trust me," the leader replied. "But trust this. If you activate the Solaris, you'll unleash something far worse than the Zalons, the Void, or anything else you've ever faced." Above the capital, the battle raged on. The Void fleet had reached Lysara's lower orbit, their sleek, black ships firing precision blasts that tore through Lysaran defenses. The Zalon armada had regrouped, launching a new wave of attacks against both their enemies. Amid the chaos, Lysara's flagship, the Dawnspire, fought valiantly, its golden hull gleaming as it fired salvo after salvo into the fray. In the war room, Cadron watched the devastation unfold. "Our fleet is at its limit," he reported grimly. "The capital's orbital defenses won't hold much longer." Valex, pacing behind him, turned with a hiss. "Then we have no choice. Activate the failsafe." Cadron froze. "The failsafe? That will destroy everything in orbit, including our own ships. If the Queens don't act, Lysara is lost," Valex shouted, his voice sharp and desperate. "We must—" A sudden, blinding pulse of energy interrupted him. The war room's holograms flickered and died as the pulse swept through the palace, knocking out power in several sections. Cadron steadied himself, his eyes widening. That came from the artifact chamber. In the chamber, the Solaris's glow had become erratic, its symbols shifting and reshaping faster than ever. The energy pulse had sent everyone staggering, and a low, rumbling hum now filled the air. "It's waking up," Ilara whispered, fear evident in her voice. "We're running out of time." Nixa stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the artifact. "Then we make the choice, here and now." Ilara grabbed her sister's arm. "Nixa, wait! We have to think this through." "There's no time for thinking," Nixa snapped, pulling away. "You've seen what's happening out there. If we hesitate, Lysara burns. And if we act rashly, we might burn everything," Ilara countered, her voice breaking. "This isn't just about Lysara anymore. It's about the entire galaxy." The Void Leader, still clutching his blade, interjected, "She's right. You can't use the artifact. It's not meant to save, it's meant to judge. And its judgment will be absolute." Nixa rounded on him, her fiery aura flaring dangerously. "Then tell me this. If the Solaris is so dangerous, why does your Void Order want it?" "To keep it from fools like you," the leader replied, his voice cold as steel. "We've seen what happens when relics like this are unleashed. Entire civilizations erased. Stars turned into black holes. If you activate it, you'll unleash a chain reaction that no one, not even you, can stop." Ilara stepped between them, her voice desperate. "Enough! We're tearing each other apart, and the artifact is feeding on it. Don't you see? It's amplifying our fear, our anger." The chamber trembled violently, as if to punctuate her words. The Solaris's glow intensified, and a sudden booming voice filled the air, not from any one person, but from the artifact itself. "Choose." Everyone froze. The voice resonated deep in their minds, its tone neither malevolent nor kind. It was ancient, vast, and incomprehensible, as though the stars themselves were speaking. Ilara looked at Nixa, her voice a whisper. "It's giving us one last chance." Nixa's jaw tightened. "Then we choose to fight." Before Ilara could respond, the Void Leader stepped forward. "Or you could choose to end this madness, destroy the artifact." The Solaris pulsed again, the booming voice repeating, "Choose." As the queens deliberated, a squadron of Void infiltrators reached the palace's upper levels, breaching the artifact chamber's perimeter. The leader's calm crackled to life. "We're in position, Admiral," a voice reported. Far above, aboard the Void flagship, Admiral Sarek watched the chaos unfold. "Hold your position," he ordered, his voice calm. "Let them make their choice. Then we strike." Back in the chamber, the Solaris began to emit beams of light, each one striking a person in the room. Nixa, Ilara, and the Void Leader froze as visions flooded their minds, visions of the past, present, and possible futures. Nixa saw Lysara burning, its people crying out as the Zalons razed everything. But she also saw herself wielding the Solaris, its power obliterating their enemies. She felt the intoxicating rush of victory and the devastating loneliness that followed. Ilara saw a future where the Solaris remained sealed. Lysara struggled but endured, rebuilding slowly. Yet she also saw the Zalons expanding, their conquests unchecked as they consumed weaker systems. The Void Leader saw a future where the artifact was destroyed. The galaxy entered an age of uncertainty, with power struggles and chaos rippling across the stars. But he also saw glimmers of hope, civilizations rising without reliance on ancient weapons. When the visions ended, the Solaris pulsed one final time, its booming voice filling the chamber. "Choose or be unmade." The chamber fell silent, all eyes on the artifact. Ilara turned to her sister, tears in her eyes. "We can't let it consume us, Nixa. We have to make the right choice." Nixa's fiery resolve wavered as she looked at the Solaris. For the first time, uncertainty filled her eyes. And what if there is no right choice? The artifact's glow intensified, its energy crackling as the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The chamber was bathed in blinding light, the Solaris artifact growing ever more unstable. Ilara and Nixa stood frozen, their breaths shallow as the weight of the artifact's ultimatum crushed them. Behind them, the Void infiltrators had abandoned all pretense of combat, their faces pale with dread as the artifact's booming voice echoed again. "Choose, or all will fall." Ilara stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "If we make the wrong choice, it's over, not just for Lysara, but for the entire galaxy." Nixa tightened her fists, her fiery aura dimming. I saw it. Ilara, I saw Lysara burning. The artifact's power can stop it. And I saw a galaxy consumed by chaos because of that same power," Ilara countered, her voice strained but steady. "This isn't just about winning or losing a battle. It's about who we become." The Void leader took a step forward, his blade lowered. "You can't control it. The Solaris judges, not serves. If you try to wield it, it will decide your fate, just as it's done to others before you." Nixa glared at him, her emerald eyes burning. "Why should we trust you? Your Void order thrives on fear and control." "Because I've seen what happens when someone tries to claim the artifact," the leader said, his voice filled with grim conviction. "I watched my own world fall because of it. The Solaris destroyed them, not out of malice, but because they weren't worthy. Outside the palace, the battle in Lysara's orbit was reaching its zenith. The Void fleet had breached the capital's last line of defense, their black ships descending through the atmosphere like birds of prey. Meanwhile, the Zalons were making their final push, their massive dreadnoughts pounding Lysaran cities with unrelenting firepower. On the surface, civilians fled as explosions tore through the skyline. The once vibrant capital was now a war zone, its streets filled with smoke and ash. Lysara's ground forces fought valiantly, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. The end seemed inevitable. Back in the chamber, the Solaris's energy surged, its light forming intricate patterns across the walls. Ilara's mind raced. Every second spent deliberating brought them closer to destruction. "We have to trust it," she said, her voice trembling. "The Solaris is testing us, not just as queens, but as beings capable of choice. If we choose out of fear or hatred, we'll fail." Nixa's fiery aura flared again, but it was less certain, more hesitant. "And what if this test is rigged? What if no matter what we choose, it's already decided?" Ilara stepped closer to her sister, placing a hand on her arm. "I don't believe that. We have to show it that we can rise above our fear, that we can choose unity, not destruction." Nixa's eyes softened for a moment, but her resolve returned. "Then we'll choose together." As the queens approached the artifact, the Void leader called out, "Wait, there's another way." Nixa turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" The leader gestured to his team, who were cautiously backing away. "The Void Order has studied the Solaris for centuries. We've uncovered fragments of its design, enough to know that it responds to balance. If one of you acts alone, it will judge you unworthy. But together," Ilara's heart sank as realization struck her. "It wants us to act as one. Unity," the leader said, his voice grim. "It's the only way." Nixa hesitated, her fiery hands dimming. "And if we fail, then the Solaris will destroy everything," the leader replied, "including itself." The queens exchanged a long, weighted look. Despite their differences, despite the growing rift between them, they knew this moment demanded trust in each other and in the strength they shared as sisters. "Together," Ilara whispered, holding out her hand. Nixa stared at her for a moment, then clasped her sister's hand tightly. "Together." The Solaris seemed to sense their unity. Its chaotic pulses began to slow, the symbols on its surface stabilizing into a clear pattern. The artifact's voice resonated once more, but this time it was calmer, almost gentle. "Show me your choice." With their hands clasped, Ilara and Nixa stepped forward, their combined energy resonating with the artifact. The Void infiltrators watched in stunned silence as the Solaris's glow enveloped the queens, its light forming a cocoon around them. Inside the light, Ilara and Nixa found themselves standing in a vast, starry void. The artifact floated before them, a pulsating sphere of light and shadow. "You must decide," the artifact's voice echoed in their minds. "Will you wield my power, or let it rest?" Ilara closed her eyes, her voice steady. "We choose to protect, not to rule, not to destroy." Nixa's fiery resolve softened, her voice following her sister's. "We choose unity, not fear, not chaos." The artifact pulsed once, its light growing brighter. "Then show me your resolve." Outside the chamber, the battlefield shifted. The Void Fleet, sensing the artifact's awakening, began to retreat cautiously, their movements precise and methodical. The Zalons, however, surged forward, determined to claim Lysara as their prize. The ground forces in the capital braced for the final assault as a massive Zalon dreadnought loomed overhead, its weapons powering up for a catastrophic strike. In the chamber, the Solaris flared brilliantly, its light piercing through the cracks in the walls and reaching into the sky. Ilara and Nixa's voices rang out together, clear and unyielding. "We choose hope." The artifact responded with a final pulse of energy, its glow intensifying until it filled the entire chamber. The queens felt its power surge through them, not as a weapon, but as a guiding force, steady and unrelenting. The chamber erupted with light, and across Lysara, the tides began to shift. The Solaris artifact's final surge of light spilled out of the chamber, cascading through the palace and into the skies of Lysara. The glow was brilliant, warm, and yet overwhelmingly powerful, a beacon that could be seen even from the war-torn surface below. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as the artifact's energy reached every corner of the system. In the heart of the capital, Lysara's defenders paused mid-battle, their eyes drawn skyward. Soldiers and civilians alike stopped to gaze at the shimmering beacon emanating from the palace. Even the relentless Zalon forces faltered, their massive war machines grinding to a temporary halt as the light washed over them. On board the Zalon dreadnought, the commanding officer barked orders to press the attack. "It's just a distraction. Focus fire on the capital." But his crew hesitated. The light wasn't just dazzling, it carried a presence, an energy that resonated deeply with all who saw it. It was as if the Solaris itself was reaching out, touching every soul in its path. Far above, the Void Fleet hung in eerie stillness. Admiral Sarek stood at the viewport of his flagship, his steely gaze locked on the source of the light. "So, the queens made their choice," he muttered. Varak, his second-in-command, approached cautiously. "What do we do now, Admiral? Do we attack?" Sarek's lips curled into a faint smile. "No, this is beyond us now. Order the fleet to hold position. Let's see how this plays out." Back in the chamber, Ilara and Nixa stood united, their hands still clasped as the Solaris's energy coursed through them. The artifact's voice resonated in their minds, deep and resonant. "You have chosen unity. Show me your resolve." The queens felt a surge of power unlike anything they'd ever experienced. It wasn't the destructive force they had feared, but something greater, an energy that amplified their strengths, their hopes, and their shared bond. Ilara spoke first, her voice steady and calm. "We ask for the strength to protect Lysara, to preserve life, not destroy it." Nixa followed, her fiery determination tempered by newfound clarity. "We ask for the courage to stand together, even when all seems lost." The Solaris pulsed once more, its symbols stabilizing into intricate patterns that glowed brighter with each passing second. Then, as if in response to their unity, the artifact's energy radiated outward, enveloping the entire chamber in a golden wave. On the battlefield, the golden wave spread like a ripple through space and time. The Xelon war machines, previously unstoppable, began to malfunction. Their dreadnoughts lost power, their weapons fizzled out, and their ships drifted aimlessly in orbit. Confusion and panic spread among their ranks as they realized they were no longer in control. Lysara's defenders, emboldened by the sudden turn of events, regrouped and pressed forward. Their weapons struck true, driving the Xelons back. Civilians cheered from the safety of shelters, hope rekindled in their hearts. In the Void Fleet, Admiral Sarek watched the unfolding events with a mix of awe and caution. "The artifact is stabilizing," Verak observed, her reptilian eyes narrowing. "Whatever the Queens are doing, it's working." "For now," Sarek replied, his voice heavy with skepticism. "But the Solaris doesn't give without taking. There will be a cost." Inside the chamber, the artifact's energy began to coalesce, forming a sphere of golden light that hovered between the Queens. Ilara and Nixa released their clasped hands, their gazes locked on the orb. "What is it doing?" Nixa asked, her voice tinged with awe. Ilara stepped closer, her expression thoughtful. "It's waiting. We've passed its test, but now it's offering us something more." The voice of the Solaris filled their minds again. "The power to rebuild, the power to unite. Will you accept this burden?" Nixa turned to her sister, her fiery aura returning, but this time with a softer glow. "If we accept, we take responsibility for more than just Lysara. This power will tie us to the entire galaxy." Ilara nodded, her own light shimmering in harmony with Nixa's. "But if we refuse, we leave the galaxy to fend for itself. Is that a choice we can live with?" The two Queens exchanged a long, silent look, understanding the gravity of what lay before them. Finally, Ilara extended her hand toward the golden sphere. Nixa followed suit, their hands touching the energy at the same time. The moment they made contact, the chamber erupted in a dazzling display of light. The Solaris's power flowed into the Queens, binding them together in a shared vision. They saw a galaxy united, not through domination, but through collaboration and understanding. They saw civilizations rising from the ashes of war, guided by the strength and wisdom of those who came before. But they also saw the cost, their own freedom. The Solaris's power was not a gift. It was a responsibility that would demand everything from them. When the light subsided, the Queens stood transformed. Their auras glowed brighter than ever, and their connection to the artifact was palpable. The Void infiltrators, now kneeling in awe, dared not move. Outside, the effect was immediate. The Xelon fleet scattered, their forces retreating as the golden wave disrupted their systems. Lysara's skies cleared, and the city below began to quiet. The Void fleet, observing from a distance, remained still, its admiral choosing not to engage. In the aftermath, Ilara and Nixa returned to the war room, their presence commanding silence as they entered. Cadron stood, his expression one of both reverence and relief. "Your Majesties, the Xelons are retreating. Lysara is safe. For now." Ilara nodded, her gaze distant. "It's not just about Lysara anymore, Cadron. The Solaris has shown us what lies ahead," Nixa added, her voice firm but tempered with newfound wisdom. "The galaxy isn't ready for what's coming, but we are." As the Queens prepared to lead their people into an uncertain future, the Solaris artifact rested in the chamber behind them, its glow now soft and steady. For the first time in millennia, it was at peace, its purpose fulfilled. The calm after the storm settled over Lysara, but it was fragile, like the stillness following the crest of a great wave. In the skies above, the remnants of the Xelon fleet limped away into the void. their once mighty dreadnoughts reduced to flickering shadows. The Void Fleet lingered on the system's edge, silent and motionless, like predators watching from the darkness. Within the palace, the artifact chamber stood quiet once more. The Solaris now rested, its golden light dim and steady, as though slumbering. Yet its influence lingered, a presence that could be felt in every corner of the palace. In the war room, Ilara and Nixa stood before the gathered council. Kadrin and Valex, along with other high-ranking advisors, listened intently as the queens addressed the aftermath of the battle. "The Zaylons will regroup," Nixa warned, her voice steady but fierce. "This was a retreat, not a surrender. They'll come back with more ships and more weapons." Ilara nodded in agreement, her tone more measured but equally resolute. "And the Void Order remains a threat. They understand the Solaris better than anyone. If they decide to act, we'll need more than just our defenses." Valak stepped forward, his insectoid form twitching nervously. "Your Majesties, the artifact's energy disrupted the Zaylons and drove back their forces. But it won't solve every conflict. What's to stop them or others from returning?" Ilara exchanged a glance with Nixa. The shared power of the Solaris still coursed through them, binding them in ways they hadn't fully understood. "The artifact showed us a path," Ilara said, her voice calm but firm. "A future where unity can triumph over chaos. But that path requires more than just power. It requires trust and collaboration." Nixa stepped in, her fiery aura flaring faintly. "And if we're going to lead the galaxy toward that future, we need to be stronger than ever. Not just as rulers, but as sisters." Far above Lysara, on the Void flagship, Admiral Sarek sat alone in his quarters, studying the aftermath through a holographic display. The Zaylon retreat had left a vacuum in the region's balance of power, one that the Void Order could exploit. But Sarek's focus was elsewhere. "The Queens surprised me," he muttered, leaning back in his chair. "They didn't use the Solaris the way I expected." Verak entered the room, her reptilian eyes scanning the display. "They chose unity. Unusual for leaders under such pressure." Sarek smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "It won't last. The galaxy has a way of breaking even the strongest alliances. Should we intervene?" Verak asked. Sarek shook his head. "Not yet. Let them build their fragile peace. When it starts to crack, we'll be there." In the capital, life began to return to normal. Civilians emerged from shelters to find their city scarred, but still standing. Lysara's defenders worked tirelessly to rebuild, repairing damaged infrastructure and providing aid to those who had suffered. Ilara and Nixa walked through the city together, their royal guards trailing at a respectful distance. The people cheered as they passed, their gratitude palpable. Yet for the queens, the weight of their responsibility was heavier than ever. "They look to us for answers," Nixa said, her voice low. "But we don't have them all." Ilara glanced at her sister, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe we're not supposed to. The artifact didn't give us a roadmap. It gave us a choice, and now we have to navigate the consequences." Nixa smirked faintly. "I hate it when you're right." That evening, the queens returned to the artifact chamber, drawn by an unspoken need. The Solaris greeted them with a faint pulse, its golden light reflecting in their eyes. "What now?" Nixa asked, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. Ilara placed a hand on the artifact's surface, feeling its warmth. "Now, we prepare. The galaxy isn't ready for the future the Solaris showed us." "But we are?" Nixa joined her, placing her own hand on the artifact. "And when the Zaylons or the Void come back?" Ilara's gaze hardened. "We'll be ready for them too." As the queens left the chamber, the Solaris pulsed softly, its energy settling into a quiet rhythm. It had tested them, judged them, and for now, it was satisfied. But the artifact's slumber was not eternal, and deep within its core, ancient mechanisms continued to stir, watching, waiting, and preparing for the next chapter in the galaxy's story. In the distant reaches of space, the Zaylons regrouped, their leadership vowing vengeance against Lysara, and in the shadows, the Void Order continued its work, studying the Queen's choices and planning their next move. But in Lysara, hope burned brighter than ever, a golden light shining against the darkness.